Have you ever seen those posts on Instagram with a guy on a yacht surrounded by a bunch of women in bikinis living the life of a Playboy? I'm sure you have, and probably wondered, how the hell did he pull that off? He must be rich and famous, or the girls must be escorts. Believe it or not, none of that has to be true, and building this lifestyle is a lot easier than you might think. In this episode, I'm going to give you the exact blueprint of how to do it and how it's way more affordable than popping bottles, paying for matchmakers, or going on fancy dates that land most guys in the friend zone. I'm going to show you how an average Joe like me pulled it off and how I've helped a handful of other average Joes pull it off too. And if you stick around until the end, you'll hear from a couple of them as well. All right, let's do this. You're listening to the Inner Confidence Podcast. My name is Robbie Kramer. I've been a coach since 2007, and I've helped countless men rapidly achieve all of their social and dating goals. My mission is simple: to help you position yourself to meet stunning women, make awesome friends, en route to becoming the most confident and attractive version you can possibly be. I am obsessed with giving you the most leveraged ways possible to win the game, so stick around, let's go. The first thing I want to talk about is probably that importance of that ratio. A common mistake that I'd say most guys make is they just invite too many guys on something like this. Basically, whatever they do, they invite too many guys. And what tends to happen is when you invite men to things, usually double the amount of men show up and about half of the amount of women show up, right? So if you're having a party and you invite 10 guys and 10 girls, you end up with 20 guys and 5 girls. And it's the stereotypical sausage fest that we all know and certainly don't love, right? So there's that the Cox multiplying phenomenon. And what happens when you try to curate a ratio of 3-to-1, it actually incentivizes people to behave way better. When a woman shows up to a party where the ratio is kind of against her favor, the first thing she might think is like, oh, wow, this is unique. Most places I go, there's way more guys, right? Because guys are obviously more motivated to go out to meet women than women are to meet men. It immediately gives you as the host and the other guys in attendance a bit of status and social proof. It also incentivizes the women to do more of the networking and the actual approaching and social skills, which they're better at anyways, right? When you have a situation where it's all men, right? Now the guys are basically thirsty and they're lurking around and they're talking to girls, and very quickly it turns off the women. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but it's better for the girls to have this 3-to-1 ratio that I recommend. And it actually makes women want to sort of compete for men, which women love to do. Women are very competitive. They love to compete. Guys, we don't really like to compete with each other when it comes to dating, because there's an element of pride involved. There's an element of what's it called? Honor, right? You don't want to steal someone's girl. You don't want to cock block. But women are a lot more, I guess, I wouldn't say consciously interested in competing. But if you watch reality TV, if you watch The Bachelor, these sorts of shows, it's more of a normal sort of role or mindset. And they enjoy it more, right? And it's just better for everybody. So anytime you're doing anything, if you have a good ratio, right? Especially on one of these trips, you're going to win. If you don't have a good ratio, you're going to lose. It's going to go south for so many different reasons. And that's obviously the hardest part. It's like, if you don't have women in your life in the first place, it's very difficult to pull this off. So this isn't like a skill that somebody with zero abundance can really do, or this isn't you're not ready to pull something like this off. But you'd be surprised. It's a lot easier to do it than you think. There's people that can help you curate that ratio. And I'll give you an example of let me share my screen on my phone here. In terms of ratio, this was at one of our Maldives trips. On this trip, I think we had 20 girls, 6 guys. So we were able to hit that ratio. Well, let's talk next about recruiting girls, because that was kind of your question, Alex, right? So what I always shoot for when you're recruiting girls is you want to know at least 50% of the girls, ideally, and you want 50% of the girls to be newbies, girls you don't know. Why this is important is if you don't have any girls that are tied to you, right? If it's all randoms, then you don't really get that amazing family type feel as easily, right? And that's kind of what you're going for. The feeling should be summer camp. Have any of you guys been to summer camp before? Or you understand how that feels? It feels like a little family. And that's what tends to happen by the end of a trip, or ideally even more in the beginning. And the girls who are new look to the girls who know the guys in terms of how to behave. And obviously the more girls know you, the more status you have with those, then they feel safe joining too, right? So you can invite your personal friends, you can invite photographers, you can invite promoters to bring girls. You can collaborate with other guys who have girls, like some of you guys are doing here in the group. And remember, you never want to like invite people and pay them to come. That just kind of kills the vibe. The most successful way to do these are in the form of photo shoots, which I'll get into in a second. But when you do a photo shoot in a remote location, then obviously the exchange of value is that, models, whether that's female or male, will come to get that content and to be shot. And in exchange, right, like they're coming on the trip, but they're working because they're being shot. And that way, the guys who aren't being shot are providing the funds to do the trip. Let's talk about the length. So ideally, you want to shoot for 3, 5, or 7 days, right? So a long weekend or a really long weekend or an entire week. I'd say the mistakes that guys make is it's like partying too hard and every night becomes like a burnout. You have to remember that every other day is going to be a fun, crazy party and then like a lull period. So if you do a 3-night trip, for example, the first night everyone's going to show up and they're probably going to be excited. And, you'll get to the villa or you'll get to the boat, wherever you are. And, people will start drinking and mingling and having fun. And depending on how late they stay up and party, right, the next day won't be as crazy. If you get to the villa really late, like what happened, I think, with Yannick's trip, right, then usually people will just crash. And then that next night, that will be a much bigger party. And that'll be more interesting. And then the night after that, likely it will be more dead because everyone's exhausted, right? And a lot of that plan is a factor of the activities you do during the day in terms of like how motivated the girls are to stay up and have fun and party that night. So that plays into it. But always remember, the last night is always like the most magical night because everyone's leaving the next day. Everyone has FOMO that they're not going to have as much fun, or maybe they won't get a chance to like hook up. So the very last night is always a big night, no matter what. So if it's a 2-night trip, then you'll probably have 2 big nights. If it's a 3-night trip, you'll have 1 on, 1 off, and then the last night be big. Always plan for that and make sure that on that last day, you don't like wear people out. So no one wants to party that last night. Let's talk about picking the right guys. So one thing, obviously, that you want to guard against is letting the ratio slip because you want more guys to split the cost. Right? It's not worth it. If you're too worried about budgets, then maybe this isn't a great thing to do. You don't want to invite guys who are like total show-offs or man of the year type who are going to like get super handsy or braggy or annoying. Like the guys have to have game. But the good thing about this is when you have the ratio in your favor, it sort of solves for guys having good game. Like you can do a lot less and still win, right? When you're in an environment where the ratio is in your favor, you can just chill for the most part. And the girls are going to be incentivized to interact with you way more. And that kind of alleviates the pressure and the tension from feeling like, oh, I got to go and spit game and talk to these girls. They'll come and talk to you. So having the right guys like that aren't thirsty, that aren't desperate is key. Because one bad apple can ruin the entire trip. And they will ruin the entire trip, right? So that's super important. I would never bring a guy that's not vetted on a trip, even if he has the money. It would just be a bad look. So the other thing is it's super important to like have a non-territorial mindset and instead have a sharing is caring sort of vibe. Jealousy, possessiveness, guys calling dibs on girls or guys trying to wife up girls on a trip like this will completely ruin the vibe. It'll set the tone that like it's way too serious and it'll make the girls way less interested in having fun and being cool. So before all of my trips, I would have like a call with all the guys and I'd be like, listen, maybe you're going to meet your future wife on this trip and everyone's sort of motivated to do that sort of thing. But if we all try to get each other, like to hook up, then it's going to be way more fun for everybody. So you're encouraging each other, you're helping each other out, right? Like you're not trying to call dibs on a girl or outcompete with her for another guy. So that's the ideal mindset. And it's super important to understand that like dominance hierarchies are always inherent in these sorts of things. So like, for example, the trip that, Yannick and Charles and David just did, what I loved about that was it was a very sort of equal dominance hierarchy, with the exception of maybe because, two of you guys were bringing girls and one guy wasn't, there was a little bit of a mismatch there, but the one guy who didn't bring the girls was more of like a party MC and a host. And that's a perfect role for a guy who doesn't know as many girls to start off with, right? Like whenever I organize a trip, I would never let guys come, even if they wanted to pay, who I knew would have absolutely no chance with any of the girls, right? Like if you're running any sort of, whether it's a sports game or anything, you want people of equal stature and status there, because if it's lopsided, it ruins it for everybody, right? So like, I don't want to bring some guy who's like, if I brought Elon Musk on the trip, that would be a big draw. Not that he would come on a trip that I invited him on, right? Or maybe he would. But if that guy came, then all the attention would be on him, right? Like we did photo shoots and we did like, we made like music videos sometimes, and we'd bring a celebrity on some of these trips. And of course, all the girls just wanted the celebrity. And sure, some of the other guys would get, some of the fallout from that. But it was a very unbalanced sort of hierarchy. And women will always, go for the guy on the top. And it doesn't make it fun or interesting. So there's a lot you can do to play with different levers to make sure all the guys are kind of on equal playing field. So one thing I would do, if I knew a guy was coming who was potentially lower status than me or some of the other guys because he didn't know the girls or he just wasn't quite as fun or cool, I would give him the best bedroom and I would hype him up to the girls. And I would put him in a position where he had status versus just not doing anything about it, if that makes sense. Right. So I think about all these things beforehand, and then that way you get the best sort of results. And the way I realized this, it was very unfortunate. My buddies were running a trip in Paris with a bunch of models, and I showed up a couple days late. And because of that, I didn't have a bedroom. So I was basically sleeping on couches, and I was not getting any interest or love from any of the girls. And I came to find out like towards the end of the trip that there was like a rumor going around that I was broke because I couldn't afford a bedroom. And I was paying the same fucking price that those guys were paying. It had nothing to do with whether I could afford it or not. It was just I got there late and they didn't give me one. They had, like, the girls took over all the bedrooms. So, perfect example of why their decision completely ruined all of my chances, and how if you don't solve for that sort of thing, then you're in a situation where it's like, I just look like a loser. So, learn that one the hard way. That sucked. I was thinking like, why am I having such a hard time? And it's very simple. Like the girls thought I was broke. And if that's the case, you're going to look like an idiot. The other thing you can do, which I started doing towards the end when I was running these trips, like I got to the point where I knew all of the girls pretty much who were coming. Obviously, there were some new ones, but my role as the planner of the trip, I had so much more status than anyone else. Even if I brought guys who were super cool, good looking, whatever, it didn't matter, to the point where I started feeling guilty about hooking up with more of the girls. So to make it even and fun, I brought like my girlfriend along on some of these trips, and I intentionally didn't hook up with anyone. I took myself off the market. And that's when I was more of trying to do this as not a real business, but I was seeing if I could monetize it. The guys appreciated that because it allowed them to feel like they had a way better shot, right? And that's always going to be the case. And that's why I don't recommend that you guys pay to go on other people's trips, because this is basically always what happens. The guys who are offering you the chance to come in exchange for cash, they're in a position of so much more status. It's almost impossible to compete with them, especially if they're single and like they're on the table, they're on the market. The girls will always choose them over you because there's that comfort and familiarity. So the only time I would consider going on someone else's trip is if that guy is going with his girlfriend and they are monogamous for that trip. Otherwise, just you're gonna get cock blocked. It's guaranteed. That's, I'd say, one of the key vital things. And the next thing that's incredibly key and vital is, like they say in the restaurant industry, location, location, location. Every guy always, comes to me when he hasn't been on a trip and he'll say, let's do a trip in Mykonos or let's do a trip in Ibiza, right? Because in his mind, he's seen other, dudes in these markets with like, a bunch of hot girls. And he's thinking like, oh, I want to do that. I want to have that experience of like being the man with all these hot girls in this, major location. But when you do that, everyone's spending skyrockets. Restaurants are super expensive. Villas are like impossible to get and they cost 10x more. You're competing with locals and VIPs. And it's the absolute biggest mistake you can make. I know, Alex, you were going to run a trip in Tulum and I was like, don't do that. Tulum is the worst place ever. You're paying the maximum to benefit the local guys in that scene. Like there's surf instructors there's club owners, there's hotel owners, right? And you're just basically importing women to those guys, right? So what happens when you actually choose a remote or boring location is you minimize distractions, you keep costs extremely low, and the focus becomes on your group and your party and what you guys are going to do. So the best sort of places to host these things, and I'll show you guys some photos, is actually like the most remote sort of places you can find. So this is the yacht that we rented for the Maldives. So I'll show you guys a better picture, video of it, right? So surprisingly, not that expensive. You'd be shocked. It came out to about $40,000 for the week when I was able to negotiate down the cost, right? And that comes with all the food, all the activities. You see that little boat that follows it. That's a scuba boat. So that's rigged with like scuba diving equipment. There's another boat that is like it's more of like a speedboat. It comes with 2 jet skis. Here's a photo of the jet skis and the girls on it. Here's a video from the top of the boat. And we would stay on we'd stay on the yacht and there were islands all around, in the off the Maldives coast there. I mean, the Maldives is just a bunch of islands basically. And there was no competition, right? There's no one else there. Here's another picture of the yacht. So if you do the math, you're going to spend way more than $40,000. I think, Alex, you were telling me when you guys just did Costa Rica, like the total cost was like $75K or something, right? For 5 days. Our total cost on this trip, this was 8 days, and our total cost was under 60 grand, including flights and everything. This is a way better, way more luxe experience, and it's cheaper. And it's shocking that that's the case. We did another trip where instead of renting the larger yachts, we rented these catamarans like this. We had 3 of these, and those were 4 bedrooms, like 1 bedroom on each tip of the cat. And then we had 3 people per bedroom. So we had 12 people per boat, right? And we had about 30, I think we had 22 girls and like 8 guys on this trip. And the problem with this, which made it way less cool, is that everyone's kind of divided on different boats, right? So it's like when it comes time to like have a group dinner, you can't really do it if you're out at sea, right? You got to go back to port or you got to find a restaurant. There's no like central location to really have a good time and to party. Here's another photo of these catamarans. And this was actually the same price. It was the same price to rent these 3 catamarans as it was to rent the larger yacht. Here's another villa we rented in Cyprus. You can see how remote this is, right? That it's just like hillsides around it. There's nothing there. And this was a 10-bedroom villa, big pool, and there was actually another villa just below it. We were able to rent both on the same property. So remember, like in terms of budgeting and expenses, most of the time men share the costs. Girls attend for free in exchange for photo shoots and content. Remote areas mean way fewer surprises. You're not going to get like $20 drinks at a club. There's no clubs to go to. There's no shopping malls to go to. There's no movie theaters, right? There's less options for a mutiny sort of situation where the girls like know a guy in town and they decide to leave your trip and go all and hang out with that guy. Like you'd be shocked what can happen if you don't sort of solve for that. What I like to do is I put all my costs into a spreadsheet. I share that with everybody. And I typically tell guys, I'm like, listen, I'm organizing the thing. So I'm going to charge 20% above costs. And that's going to go towards like my management and me doing all the work to arrange all this shit. Also, you have to understand that for me to be able to invite all of these girls, right? Like there are a lot of costs associated with that network. Right? The cost to upkeep a social circle, you know, you're hosting parties at home, you're hosting things, you're hosting dinners, and all of that has a cost to it, right? So when a guy would say something like, oh, why am I paying more for your trip? I'll be like, well, fine, I'll go on your trip, except you don't have a trip because you don't know these girls and you don't have any connection. So that's what, like, you are paying for my cost to sort of upkeep this and for all the headaches that go into it. And you know, let me ask you, do you think 20% is too much to charge? Would any of you guys have an issue with a 20% over cost situation? I doubt it, right? For that sort of experience. All right, before we continue on, I'm going to take a shot of Magic Mind. This stuff's great. A few months ago, I realized my mental health game was kind of slipping. Was working a lot. I was kind of stressed and I wasn't sleeping all that well. And that's when I started thinking about my mental health a little bit more and basically investing in habits that boosted my resilience across 5 different pillars, and that's sleep, diet, exercise, stress management, and you're not going to guess the last one, exogenous compounds. For me, Magic Mind's been super helpful. It's a great part of my routine. Take it every day. It's not a magic pill, of course, but it fits right into my plan for building mental wealth. So in the morning, I typically drink this, and then before I go to bed at night, I take their elixir that's makes me fall asleep faster and improves my sleep quality. I wake up more refreshed. I find that I have less dreams. And together, they're calling this their 24 hours pack. And for this month, they're offering 45% off through my special link. If you're ready to level up your mental health game, check out the link. It's in the description. It's magicmind.com/innerconfidencejan. So this was the castle we chose. This was like an hour outside of Rome. I think it was in Perugia. Like there's nothing there. It's a freaking castle in the middle of nowhere. It's a former Pope's castle, right? But how cool is that? Like when, you know, before we were going on the trip, I was like, who wants to go party in a castle where the Pope used to live? Like how fucking awesome that. And this place wasn't expensive. It was like $600 a night, right? And it was, I think it was 12 bedrooms, just a freaking monstrous place, right? So half the castle, basically what you can see here, basically everything to the left of this tree was the rentable castle, and everything to the right, which is almost the same exact size, was closed, was completely closed. It was like where they were housing like artifacts and other, valuables. And at one point, some of the girls, I think they took some mushrooms and they jumped over these turrets on the top, and they went into the other side of the castle, which triggered a bunch of alarms. And then the cops showed up and they're effectively trespassing. And they're like, oh, we didn't do it. Like, we have the footage. So they kicked us out, unfortunately, the last night. So yeah, always be careful of girls doing crazy shit. But you know, this was an awesome place. And then because we flew in and out of Rome, the last day we cruised around Rome. I got this fun photo with me in the middle of a bunch of chicks on the Spanish Steps here. But you can still have like that in the city experience, because wherever you fly into, there's going to be, typically it's a major airport, which is, housed a major city. We did a trip in Greece, And of course, we all flew into Athens, and then we drove. It was a 5-hour drive from Athens to Lefkada, which is a very remote place where we rented a villa, little fishing town, no competition, no nothing. Here's a cool little drone video we got of the, this is like a zoom out so you can see the full thing of the castle. There's a big lake there. So there's just nothing around, right? There's no competition. There's no worry about the girl's going to do something else. So also provides for awesome content. Another part that's super important is to make sure you take deposits from guys. If you don't do that, you know, shit will happen last minute. And if you don't, if people aren't committed, right, then you're in trouble. More guys sharing the cost. In terms of transportation and car rentals, it's important to like always have the biggest vans you could possibly have, and then one cool car that you can do kind of photo shoots in. So for example, this was the car that we had on the Cyprus trip. You know, it was one like a Mercedes convertible, right? We're having fun taking photos on the car. And the other stuff we rented were more just like, oh, there she's stripping there. In this one, you can see the cars behind us. These were kind of the other cars, just, you know, vans, whatever, nothing impressive, but better to rent the biggest cars possible. And that way everyone can kind of cruise together. Don't let the girls drive. We had one girl crash an ATV and almost kill herself. She flipped over the handlebars, somehow missed a rock. Thank God she was wearing a helmet. She would have been dead for sure. She was going like 35 miles per hour, top speed. Another car came down the opposite side of the road and she just got spooked. And as soon as that car passed, she just turned the wheel and went straight into a hill. Luckily, she went into that hill and not down the other side of the cliff. Then she would have died for sure. But, you know, just don't make sure you have insurance. Don't let the girls drive, no matter how much they say we're a great driver. I mean, obviously, if you know the girl and you trust her, but if somebody gets hurt or something bad happens like that, the entire trip is ruined. So same thing goes with boats. Having the right number of vehicles and, you know, the proper logistics is huge, because if people get stranded, you're fucked. So we did another trip. This was, we basically brought 3 of these RVs and we kind of like circled the wagons out in Sedona, Arizona, right? Talk about desolate and remote. We're literally like boondock camping in the middle of nowhere, right? I mean, we're close to Sedona, of course. So we're like, hey, we're going to do a trip in Sedona. We're renting these cool RVs. You know, we're setting up little camps out here. And this was great. It was a lot of fun. It was like 4 of us guys. I think like 8 or 9 girls. You know, we had a Jeep and we were taking the Jeep out and doing photos in the Jeep. So that's another sort of fun trip. It doesn't have to be like an exotic yacht or place. So in terms of like group chat and pre-trip anticipation, this is really important. So I would always start a WhatsApp chat, you know, 1 week ahead of the trip. And I would put all the crucial info in there, like when to meet up, the house rules, you know, information about where we're going to be. I'd encourage a bunch of playful banter to build hype. I would make sure to not let the chat like go off topic or get negative. And I wouldn't allow for people to start like, you know, saying like, oh, I want this room or I want that room. I would try to keep it on the rails, if that makes sense. But that builds a lot of excitement and a lot of anticipation. And it, you know, what's great about WhatsApp is everyone typically has a profile photo, and you can drop files in WhatsApp. You can link to IGs in there. IG can be good, but it's not, the IG group chat function isn't nearly as robust as something like WhatsApp. Telegram's another example, but not a lot of people are on Telegram. So remember, trying to herd a bunch of cute girls, it's like herding cats. Women will miss their flights. They will do the things that you would just never expect them to do. Like, doesn't matter if it's like $1,000 flight, you know, from LA to the Maldives. They'll figure out a way to miss it, or they won't have their passport, or they'll do something. So when it comes to like getting to and from airports, always meet up at your spot or a central location close to where everyone lives, and then take a big shuttle together to the airport, get there 3 hours ahead of time. If you need to tell people that the flight's at an earlier time than it really is, do so. There will be delays. I even missed one of the flights myself, which was embarrassing, right? I organized the trip to the Maldives and I fucking missed the flight with 2 girls because we had this ridiculous Uber driver who didn't fill up his car with gas and there was like so much traffic. We missed the damn flight, and it kind of, luckily it wasn't that big of a deal for everyone else. Like they still had fun, but we missed a day. And so that was just dumb. So, double confirm passports, double confirm everything, and don't give girls the opportunity to do something ridiculous. I know that just happened to you, Yannick, with girls missing the flight, and that ended up forcing you guys to arrive late and you kind of missed the party on the first night. So it's even more important if it's a shorter trip. So the next thing that's really important, this could make or break a trip, is the room assignments and privacy. Randomly assigning rooms or not assigning any rooms will just lead to chaos. Basically, the girls, like the more sort of alpha girls, will just run in the house first and just take the room, and they'll be like, no, this is for me and my girl. No one else can stay here. And then you're like, wait, but this girl doesn't have a room. We need to put her with them. And they might not have a good vibe, right? That could really fuck things up. So I do a lot of thinking ahead of time about room assignments, and I have those assignments in my mind ahead of time, and I don't allow the girls to just run rampant and pick all the rooms. I ask returning girls like who they're cool to room with. I'm going to rather have the returning girls room with guys because those girls are already like on my team. So it's all private room assignments, and I just kind of say like, you're in this room, you're in this room, you're in there, and I'm talking. That's all a very much part of the plan. Remember, girls can triple up. Typically, better for guys to have their own room, or to just crash wherever on the couch. Like I kind of went over this before, but obviously the guy with the lowest status gets the best room. That's a way where he could even out the playing field. So. Don't be a tyrant and take all the good stuff. If you're if you're planning, don't take the master bedroom. Like that's, you could, but don't do it. It's going to just leave a salty taste in everyone's mouth. In terms of crafting the vibe and like the etiquette, really important to like minimize drama, create a vibe of no argument, like no bad vibes. You're aiming for fun, sexy, but still safe. Remind guys not to ask desperate, not to like one-on-one the girls too much and try to overinvest. When conflicts come up, just take those people aside and resolve them like, out of the main sphere. Conflicts will come up. It's normal. It happens on every trip. There will be some conflict of some sort, and it's just not a big deal. But remember, like that's a great chance to sort of like win the shit test, right? And when girls see that you solve it properly, you're just going to look even better. Encourage like lots of group activities, playing drinking games, playing like icebreaker games when people meet up, and tell guys that are coming on the trip, like, listen, there's no guarantees here. This isn't like you're going to come and you're going to hook up. Like, we're going to create an environment where people want to do that, just like at summer camp. But, this isn't some like hooker trip. A lot of people get the wrong impression because they see those sorts of things like advertised in Colombia, like the sex island, that sort of shit. That's not this at all. That's like a whole illegal fucking thing. This is like a bunch of cool people having fun, no expectations. And girls will just sort of feel out from the returning girls, like what the vibe is and how sort of sexy and fun it is. So that's the vibe. And remember, if you're the planner, most of the people, it's your job to encourage people to mingle and to have fun. Spin the bottle is always like an easy game you can play on one of the nights. I always try to encourage the girls to get it going, and it doesn't have to be kissing people. It can just be literally like kiss someone on the cheek or give them a hug, right? It can be really PG. And as time goes on and people get more drunk, it becomes more and more X-rated typically. And then, people start having more fun. There's Jenga with, writing on the blocks. There's Two Truths and a Lie. There's all sorts of fun games you can play. You can bring, card games and other things, but you want to encourage people hanging out in a group environment and the most amount of social time as possible. Let's see, common mistakes. Like I said, the big three are failing with the ratio, failing with the location, and providing a place where you can just have a mutiny or have competition from locals, or where you're going to spend more money. If you solve for location and ratio, most of the other problems kind of take care of itself. I think the coolest part of what we have going on in the group here is like so many of you guys collaborating on these trips and doing this stuff together, and posting in the Discord for help. I'm like that's what I think is my biggest win so far of 2025 is like, the fact that like the three of you guys, Yannick, like don't even live in the same city, and you guys all put a trip together and all collaborated and flew into a common spot and got awesome content and had a lot of fun and did like the first one of these, because you've done a lot of house parties on your own and you kind of followed the formula like a gangster. And I love to see you guys doing this. Like same with you, Alex. You flew to Tenerife with Tuan, and you guys did this, and now you're doing the bigger things, and you learn so much from each attempt. You're going to fuck this stuff up, of course, right? But you're going to understand the lessons, and really be able to build on it. And I think we've curated a group of guys that like, they understand these principles and they have the right vibe. And that's the hardest thing to do. It's finding other guys with the right vibe. Because the girls will match your vibe. That's the hardest thing. It's like planning it, having the core group of guys, because you can't do it alone, of course, right? And having one guy is okay, but you can really, with one guy, it's really hard to do a trip, right? You could do like a house party or that sort of thing, and you can bring other people, and the vibe isn't as important. If one guy's kind of like weirdo, not that big of a deal, but if you have a weirdo on a trip, forget it. The whole thing's going to be spoiled. So I love that you guys have been, working on the stuff, and, it's, again, you don't have to be rich to do any of this stuff, right? Like you don't, it's way easier to pull off and cheaper to pull off than most vacations guys take, right? Like if you take a vacation and you go to Paris or you go to London and you're shelling out, $400 or $500 for a hotel room and you're going to nightclubs, you're spending more money than if you were doing something like this. So it's the absolute best way to run your social life and to party. So in terms of debriefing, what I would do each night of the event, or the following morning, we would do like a little powwow between me and the other guys. We'd meet in one of the rooms and we would just discuss what happened the day before, all the social dynamics, problems to look out for. We debriefed the previous day, and that was super helpful. And the girls would a lot of time be like, what are they talking about? Like, I wonder if they're going to like throw anybody out, or like, it made them again on their best behavior, because they knew that we were working as a team to have the best experience possible. Because girls can be maniacal and conniving, and they could attempt to like have more power or do things that like benefit them particularly, versus the whole group vibe. So you got to watch out for that. And then, in terms of marketing, and no matter, even if the trip sucks, and it's a total flop, as long as you get a few photos and videos, it can be, and a complete game changer for future trips, right? And the same goes for house parties too. Even if you have like a lame house party and only one or two girls show up, you can still get awesome shots from a photo booth if you set that up and use that as marketing for future things. What tends to happen is people will dump all their photos after into that WhatsApp chat. A lot of people, and this happened with a bunch of the girls that would come on our trips, is they would make like video montages, and they would post those in the group. So you're not going to be the only one creating content, but you should always have that in the back of your mind. What's just as important as having fun on this trip is documenting it, because the documenting it will create the vibe in the future. So leaning into all the ways you can edit that content and make that look cool and awesome will build your Instagram. It'll just build future status. And when you come back home, like the connection you have with those girls is so much stronger, right? And that could lead to all the local events that then create more leads for the following trip. And when I did that first trip in the Maldives, after a week, I literally had 20 very close girlfriends, right? Like obviously most were platonic, of course, some more than platonic in Ukraine. And that's why I moved to Ukraine. Like, I instantly plugged into a way better social circle than I had anywhere in the US, right? Because in each city, right, I know 10 hot chicks but like you bond with people so fast on a trip. And also Ukraine was an amazing place in terms of like low cost of living. And like I had so much fun on that trip. It was really just like a launch pad to moving there. So one of these things could radically change the course of your life and your social circle. It's the web is just ever expanding and endless. I met so many cool people through hosting these trips, people that like were way like out of my league sort of status wise. On one of the trips, the founder of Telegram came for a brief period of time, right? Yeah.
Fucking Pavel.
He was there. Yep.
Great.
That's how I met Hadaway, who's a close friend of mine, right? He's the guy who sings, "What is love, baby? Don't hurt me. Don't hurt me." Met a bunch of Russian rappers, a bunch of Ukrainian people. Like, I met Ace of Base through Hadaway, Mr. President through him. Just like a really amazing, like it is the best networking, right? Because when you meet a guy in a fun party environment, you're not talking about like work or business or anything like that. Like you really get to know them, and that provides the relationship to then, expand upon.
Wait, because I'm looking at all these fancy boats, right?
Mm-hmm,
like it does seem as if they don't have a big capacity for overnight stays, right? How many people could you sleep on your yacht?
So this yacht had 9 staterooms, right? So it's got one giant room that's like the master bedroom, and I would always give that to, obviously the guy who spent the most would get that room, but you could have I would have him in there, and usually a few girls would also stay in that room, right? And then you have 9 rooms total. So we would have 6 guys and usually 18 girls on this trip, and that kept the 3-to-1 ratio. There was the master bedroom, and then there were 2 like top suites, and then there were 6 suites in the whole. Plus, this had a crew of 8 to 10, Maldivian guys who would work.
You said you could sleep 24 guests or something, right? That's
yeah, 3 people per room, right? So it's 27, 9 times 3, right? And then that's not including the crew. So the crew has their own, cabins in the front of the ship. So, no one's expecting like their own room or anything like that. It's just kind of like a free for all. So obviously, like, you're not going to have guys share rooms, and you tell the girls, like, you guys can all, share these rooms. You can sleep wherever you want. You don't have to share a room with the guys. Everyone's going to be respectful. No one's going to be like touchy or gross, right? That's all part of the culture before the trip happens, right? And that's why you want the returning girls, right? So that way they're like, oh, I want to stay with him, or I want to stay with him, blah, blah, blah. And then the new girls are like, okay, cool. It's normal that all the guys are sharing rooms with the girls. And that's kind of the culture. Versus if you have only new girls and you try to pull that off, they're going to be like, that's weird. I don't want to share a room with a guy. I want my own room, right? And they're going to act more entitled, and you'll get those sorts of problems.
I think it's fine. I think I have no issue with the 20%. What I do have an issue with, and this is what the Costa Rica trip had, was that they were generally just trying to get fancier and fancier, and like it was like, why? Like what's the value of something being extra fancy versus it not? Like there's like marginally, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think Costa Rica was a bad decision. And it was a better choice than Tulum, but Costa Rica, especially Santa Teresa, is an incredibly competitive environment. Right? 70% of the population is Israeli guys, who are the most competitive dudes on the planet when it comes to partying and girls, and they really understand this stuff. And everything's expensive there. It's really hard to get to, but it's not remote when you get there, right? Like it takes forever to get there, but then when you're there, there's an infrastructure of a scene, there's restaurants, there's parties, there's stuff to do. And so the girls understand that, and they want to go to those iconic spots and get those photos. When we would do trips in Cyprus, there's nothing there. No girls like, oh, I want to like go to that fancy nightclub in Cyprus. There's an abandoned ship that's cool to look at, right? There's some restaurants down by the dock with a bunch of like yacht people who sail like sailboats, like old British people, but there's no local competition of like a nightlife industry. So you want to go somewhere where there's no nightlife, and that way your party is the nightlife, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, I think the guiding philosophy is, there's some luxury aspects and some fancy aspects, but you're also sorting for decisions that generally put the attention on the group, not externally, not on like a club or, I don't know, whatever, like surf instructors or whatever.
Exactly.
You're generally trying to say, hey, well, we got some cool shit here, but by the way, the coolest stuff going on is us, not this other stuff.
Exactly. You are the party. You are the entertainment. People are coming for that group experience, that summer camp sort of vibe, the family vibe, right? So really important.
Because by the way, I will say this as well too. You're entirely correct that like, are women fair? Do they feel any sort of like equity obligation of like once you bring them there? No, they don't give a fuck.
No, we had girls when we did that trip that I mentioned with the catamarans. One of the girls, I almost didn't bring her. And I should have listened to my co-host. He's like, don't bring her. She's entitled. She's annoying. But I really wanted to bring her because I had a crush on her. Right. And I brought her. And when we got to the docks, those catamarans were parked next. This was in Cannes, where they have the Cannes Film Festival. And those, we're walking by these mega yachts, like the one that we took in the Maldives. And we finally arrived to the 3 catamarans, which are nice catamarans, but they're nothing compared to the Maldives sorts of yachts, right? And the first thing she says is like, wait, we're going on these like crappy little boats? And all the other girls could hear, and it totally changed the vibe. She ended up stealing the 3 hottest girls, and she knew like a French, like a descendant of like the Monaco royalty. And like he came and picked her up and the 3 other hottest girls, and they were gone. We paid their airfare to basically hang out with these fucking Monaco guys.
Brutal. I know exactly. So you basically just function as her transportation. So like you brought her there.
Exactly. And it killed the vibe for the other girls too. The other girls were like, oh, these guys are lame. It really, really fucked things up. So like that's a big, a big mess up.
Robbie, I have a question just in terms of trying to design, like this is the marketing part and call it the pitch, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get the idea that we kind of want to make a compelling trip, have a bunch of cool stuff on there. We don't need to go overboard, but have enough cool, interesting things, a photo shoot, all of that. That essentially goes into the pitch with us kind of doing a casting call, really trying to figure out which women we can come on that want to come, that we get buy-in from, that will like. Can you just talk about that in terms of the kind of the initial salesman part, of like, how do you get girls to come on the trip?
You show versus tell. Right. And what you do is you show cool photos of the villa. You show photos of like photo shoots happening, right, that are kind of location independent. So let me share some others on.
Basically, you sell it with, you're saying, some of the previous trips. So I could do that with Costa Rica, for example. I can show them, hey, I was just here.
Exactly. I would share photos like this, right? There's like, me being a photographer with girls having fun, stuff like this. Here's us dressing up all the girls in pirate outfits on the beach in the Maldives. And then we have them like running on the beach, in slow-mo. So it's, you make it all about the group experience and the fun, right? Obviously I'd show them photos of the yacht, fun stuff like this with us, just like, being shuttled from the main boat to one of the smaller boats with all the girls dressed up as pirates. So you're trying to show fun.
It's a combination of showing all previous trips that were awesome, like on IG, and then just detailing what you're planning to do on the new trip.
Yeah. So I'd have an itinerary of like what we're doing each day, and there's always depending on like there's one big activity, right, and that activity is kind of what you plan around, like. And there's usually one photo shoot, right? So the activity will be like group dinner, and then a themed party. So like a pirate, or like for example, we did like a pirate photo shoot during the day that day on one of the islands. And then at night we did like a white party / dinner. So a typical day is, you wake up, you have breakfast, you don't really start anything until like 11 or 12. And then you go and you do a photo shoot, which is also could be centered around a lunch. And then you go back, you have like chill time in the afternoon, people could work out, or they can hang out, they can nap. And then you do a group dinner. This is where it's great to have a chef, or ahead of time, you ask girls like if they like to cook, and if they're, if they enjoy that, you can have the girls sort of do that work. And you can also, you tell people, it's like, listen, you're coming on this trip. The people that aren't paying are kind of expecting the other people to, or the people who do pay are like, we're paying to not have to do some of the grunt work, like the cleanup and the cooking and the cleaning, that sort of stuff. So you're incentivizing some of the girls, and most girls will just kind of do that naturally. Like they'll want to help out. I'm not saying be like, an entitled jerk and like don't ever help. Like I always helped clean. I would always invite people to help cook. One of the most fun things for me was just like when I got there, I would grab like 2 or 3 girls and I'd take the Mercedes and be like, oh, let's go grocery shopping. Right. And now I'm buying groceries with a bunch of hot girls. Like even buying groceries is fun. Right? Like it can be a great experience. Doing anything with a group of hot girls is fun. Doesn't matter really what you're doing. So the cooking, the cleaning, hire a chef versus go to a bunch of expensive restaurants. Obviously choose a place where there aren't a lot of expensive restaurants. You'll save money. And those can all be, great sorts of activities to put in the schedule as well.
It sounds like, because look, if you have an amazing villa, right? Like it's not like, oh, it's my shitty apartment in New York City or whatever. Like you have an amazing villa. Like why wouldn't you want a chef to cook you there? Like that's
saying we have a private chef is a selling point, but you're actually saving a lot of money, right? So for an example, I'll show you guys some of this was like a group lunch, right, that we did. Very cheap. This is this was less than like $8 a person. This big lunch, and we use this as like a photo shoot as well. We did this BDSM style like after dinner party where we had all the girls dress up. One of the girls was an electronic violinist, so you can hear her kind of rocking out there. And, this creates a fun vibe, obviously.
It sounds like if you can figure out food, like what, at the villa, that trumps going out to eat in a restaurant, right? Like it's basically better.
Yeah, we would go to one meal at a restaurant during the trip, right? And it would typically, sometimes it would be like the day we left. So for example, in the Maldives, there was like a very cool resort that was, iconic, and girls would be like, oh, I want to go to this resort. So we would, on the last day, our flights were usually like 6 or 7 p.m. We would go there for lunch on the last day, right? So that there wasn't anything else to do that day, right? There's no party that night. We're flying out. So you can do the stuff that's like, iconic, but bad for the vibe on the last day or the day you sort of get there, if it's close to the airport, that sort of thing.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Because here's what I experienced in Costa Rica is that going to eat out at a restaurant, I think we did it a couple of times. It's actually just a pain in the ass to even get all of these people there, get on a bus, do whatever, do all this stuff. And then like, we're there, all right, we're eating at a restaurant. And then it's just a lot of overhead, like so much overhead.
It's expensive. It's boring. There's other people there that are like, macking on your girls. There's no upside. If you can do something in-house and have a chef, the food's going to be better too with the chef. So, one thing you can do, you can find a hot girl who's a chef and invite her on the trip for free. She'll come and she'll cook for nothing. You can find these sorts of people. Don't hire a guy DJ who's going to have all the status and get all your girls. Get a hot girl who's a DJ and have her come. And have her be the DJ, right? Don't hire a male photographer who, again, is going to trump you in status. Become a photographer yourself, or hire female photographers to come for free, right? So like anything where you think you need some guy or you think you need to pay a person or do a thing, there's a equally hot and talented girl who can do that same job, which helps your ratio, which crushes everything. And that's why I tell every guy is like, learn to be a photographer and learn to DJ. Like you can learn both in a day to fool like the average person, right? The average person has no idea about photography or DJing. You can learn, you could be like in the top 5 percentile in literally a day to the uninformed onlooker, right? Who is most girls.
Hey, look, Twan and I are golf pros, man. And it only took a couple hours.
There you go. Right? To the untrained eye.
Man, it's real.
Yep. 100%.
I have a question about the invitation marketing side of things. You were talking about showing pictures of past trips and so on, and talking a little bit more about the destination and so on. Would you send all of that in like one big text message to the girl with the picture and so on, or would you show them only in person, or kind of how? I'm always wondering with these invitations how much investment to show. Like if I drop them a big text message and a bunch of pictures, it's quite a lot, but I also want to sell it as well as possible, right?
Yeah, good question. I would have like less text and more photos. And the beauty of WhatsApp is like you can send 20 photos at once and it'll put it in just like one folder for you, right? So I can say, hey, we're doing a fun photo shoot / trip at XYZ. I could tell you all about it, but a photo's worth 1,000 words. So here's 20,000 words. Right? You just drop a bunch of photos and then you gauge her reaction. If she seems interested, obviously she's going to come back and she's going to ask questions and be like, actually, let's talk about it in person. I'm sure there's a lot to talk about. Let's, grab a coffee or grab a beer and go over it. Right. And the photos are really all you need. They're going to show like the place you're going. You don't have to show like the itinerary or the schedule. You might not have that yet, but just showing like cool people doing cool stuff, like in a cool location, like who's going to say no to that? This is literally the dream of most young hot girls, is to like go and be, shot for something. Like the benefit that we did was like ultimately when I was doing this at the biggest scale, we had the rights to shoot for Playboy in Eastern Europe. And so having the Playboy brand behind us was, a game changer. It was instant credibility. But I did trips in the Hamptons. I did trips like the one I showed you when we rented the RVs in Sedona. And for that, instead of like making the focus on like, oh, we're shooting for Playboy, it was like, we're going to Sedona, which is a very sort of chick cracky place because it's synonymous with like, energy and metaphysical things. Sedona is kind of known as like, like for spiritual girls, they love Sedona, right? There's amazing sightseeing there. When we did the Hamptons, right? The Hamptons are great because it's also remote, right? There's nightclubs and stuff there, but it's hard to get to. You can do most of the stuff in a villa. So, but the name the Hamptons is cool, right? And there's like little day trips you can do there and like beautiful beaches and cool things like that. So whatever place you're going, like it's going to have these keywords or these key photos associated with it. And you focus on that, right? And you focus on the cool people and the vibe.
I was going to ask you, just in terms of the casting call, like just trying to filter for the right type of girl, like are any questions? I remember you said something about, you kind of jokingly, you got to sleep with someone on the trip. It could be a girl or a guy, kind of wink or haha. And obviously not enforce that, but just to see the reaction.
Well, yeah, it depends on the vibe of the trip, right? Like, so what I would sort of say to girls who were sort of on the fence, and I was like, I don't know if I want them to come because they might be kind of lame and boring, or they might spend all the time in their room. I'd be like, listen, we're a pretty crazy group of people. Like we get after it. We party hard. This isn't like we're going to go to bed and watch, Friends in our room. Like we get after it and party hard. So if that's not your vibe, great. Like I always tell people like, this is summer camp. We're going to have a good time. If you think you're definitely not going to hook up with somebody, I don't care if that's a girl or a guy, you probably won't want to be around us because, we get after it. So
cool. I like that. I like that. You're basically saying that's probably, there will be hooking up with other people and that's sure.
And you don't have to, like, if it's your first trip and you think you're going to turn people off by saying that, you don't have to do that. That, you know, I didn't do that until like very future later trips when I had enough sort of status where I could own that and not feel bad about it, right? And because remember, like, to say something like that, like, that's a really strong frame, and you might get some girls being like, you know, you might get some bad reactions. So if you're not confident saying that, I would say to not do that yet. Just saying, like, we get after it, we party, we're up late, right? Crazy stuff happens. If you're the sort of person who wants to, like, you know, do a photo shoot and then have dinner and go to bed at 8 p.m., like, this isn't the trip for you.
Right. And then to gauge her reaction, like, she either is like, oh, wow, that, you know, that sounds amazing. Or it's like, oh, okay. You know, or she's, you know, sure.
Yeah.
Then you kind of know whether she's a fit.
Exactly. And you want to show that in the marketing material that you send, right? You want to include like photos of parties and people having fun and not just like photo shoots and beautiful villas, and, like, you know, you got to set the vibe for what you actually want to create.
Right. Because I will tell you, there were a couple of girls that came on my trip that, like, yeah, I think they just were really there just for the photos, and like, they, you know, they didn't really give a shit about even interacting with other people. It's not great, you know, like, they're not so much about the group is what I'd say.
This was the trip I did for I think it was my 37th birthday. So you guys get the idea, right? This is that was for my birthday. And if you show that, you know, if you show that sort of photo to, or that video to girls coming, that obviously shows the vibe.
Well, right. It seems like, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like to just be able to go on a trip like that, you are hugely kind of like, you have this high status because you made it. You're a part of, like, you're on the trip, like, with these other people. So they're like, look, this trip is so, you know, kind of cool and rare, and you're there. Therefore, you automatically have, like, status and you're cool, etc.
Oh, yeah.
Just because you're there.
Well, it creates, like, when you're on this trip, right, and you've done the hard work of picking the right location and it's remote, you are the entire dating market is that trip. There is nobody else, right? And you're there for a set amount of time. So it's like all of the girls are there. Like, you are the only guy, right? And it's also probably important to, like, filter. Another reason, like, some girls will come, like, if they're in a relationship or something like that, like, you don't want those girls coming. They're going to be on the phone the whole time with their boyfriend, and he's going to be jealous or figuring out ways to try to show up and ruin the trip. We've had shit like that happen. Like, don't invite girls who are in a relationship. It's just bad for everybody. But you will become, like, the center of that dating market, right? And it can put you in a position of status where you could now, like, punch up in weight class, like 2 or 3 points, 4 points out of your league, right? I've seen guys who, like, call him a 5.5 in LA. On one of these trips, he's a 9, and he's hooking up with 9s because, like, that's all there is, right? But he's figured out how to get himself on that trip, which is the hard work, and that is what makes that guy literally a 9.
Like, the hard work is done, you're there, and
Yep.
and what I would basically say, as long as you're fuckable, then it's okay. Like, you could be the fuckable 5.
Yeah.
That's it.
You don't have to run game. You can just chill, and the ratio does all the work for you, right? Like, when there's limited options, the girls, like, want to network and they want to have fun and they want to talk to you, right? Like, it's not a nightclub where you're, like, running around hoping for any girl to just give you, like, a morsel of attention.
So the nightclub, you are literally competing with other guys that are taller, blah 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 blah, and like, yeah, it's just not it's not the same competition at all. If yeah.
Yeah, if you're not like, like, I don't know, I'd give myself like a 6 or a 7, right? In the looks department, I'm 5'10", not that good looking, got a big Jewish nose. I'm not the, I think I'm kind of witty or funny, but I'm not hilarious, right? Like, I don't have anything that is really going to allow me to compete with like a Chad, right? Like, and no matter how much, like, even if I get in like tip top shape, whatever, I'm not winning any like beauty pageants, but I can compete by controlling the ratio, controlling the environment, just being myself and having fun and being in a situation where the supply and demand works in my favor, right? It's all about the setup.
You have high status and you're there. You have access. You actually made it on the trip, and these other Chads did not.
Exactly. I mean, Dan Bilzerian says it perfectly in his book. The book's called The Setup, right? He won at this because he figured that shit out. He figured out the setup. It's not rocket science. It's literally just the stuff we went over, right? Like, any guy can do this. You just have to be smart and understand the setup again. So, other questions or concerns, or like, this seems doable, seems impossible. For some of you guys who haven't said anything.
Yeah, I have something if no one else wants to go. How much should I try to micromanage their behavior if I kind of notice them doing something uncool?
Yeah, so I would always set the expectations before the trip. I'd be like, I would do a call with all the guys, and I'd be like, listen, I've done this stuff before. The social dynamics are obvious to me. They're not going to be obvious to you because it's your first time. So with your permission, I'd like the ability to like debrief, after each day in the mornings. And, if you're, I don't want to give, what's the word? Like when you give like advice that nobody asked for,
unsolicited advice.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't want to give unsolicited advice. But I have a lot of very valuable things to share. And if you would allow me to sort of be in that like, coaching role, that would benefit all of us. And that way we'll debrief. If there's something I see that's happening that's not optimal, like I might pull you aside and say like, hey, this is going on, blah, blah, blah. So I'm setting that expectation ahead of time. And of course, like, if a guy's like, no way, fuck you, like, I'm not going to bring him, right? Like, no one's going to say no to that. I've never had a guy say no to that. And I've brought some really like high status guys, right? And I don't frame it in a way like I'm better than you or I know. It's just like I've been before and I've seen things go wrong. So let's talk about it. And when stuff comes up, like, ask me, be like, what's going on here? How could we all like work together to have the best time? So we would do those debriefs. I'd have that conversation ahead of time. Like, to this day, I have a Maldives chat with the very first trip we do. And that, like, there's communication in that chat almost every day, just because we're all so close in life. And we talk about three of us are married now in that group. And that's been going strong. We just had somebody post literally like the other day, these photos were from 7 years ago. That's when we did the trip, right? Like, someone posted in there. So it's cool. Like, the friendships that are built through these things are incredible. And for that trip, to be clear, we had like our chat was called Maldives Strategy. That was me and the 5 other guys. And then I had another group chat for everybody, including the girls too. But I had just a guys chat, of course, as well. And if situations came up, I could text them in the group, be like, yo, check your phone, right? If something's going awry and I didn't want to like pull them out or so. And that was, I learned so much as hosting these things and overseeing all of these social dynamics. It was like a crash course or a PhD in like group party dynamics and just behavioral psychology, I guess. I should write a book on it someday. Or I have I have a journal of every day from the first trip of like everything we did and, who hooked up with who. And it's quite fascinating. I'd be happy to share that in the group if anyone's interested.
What are the prerequisites, would you say, for doing one of these trips? Good
question. So, like, depending on who's going, right? Like, if Yannick's hosting and he's like inviting guys from the group, the prerequisites is like you were invited. If the host invited you, obviously he thinks highly enough that you could go. But if you're in a situation where you feel like, oh my God, if I'm around those hot models, I just feel like a fish out of water. I'm going to put all this pressure on myself to hook up, and that's going to sabotage my chances. And if I went on this trip and spent, a couple $1,000s and I didn't hook up, I'm going to be really upset. If you're entertaining those thoughts, you're probably not ready for it, right? Because you're just going to be in the wrong headspace about it. And that's why it's so important to kind of like, have lots of dates under your belt and be approaching women and being very active in your social and your dating life, and to be consistently sort of interacting with beautiful girls, even if that's you like running up to them and approaching them on the street, right? Like if you're just uncomfortable around hot girls and I throw you into a situation where there's a bunch of hot girls doing a photo shoot, like you're going to effectively go into like a fight, flight, or freeze response, right? Because you're scared, and then you'll just be like a shell of yourself. And, that's going to put you at a big disadvantage to the other guys there who are more sort of comfortable and outgoing and free to interact, in a social way.
And then if you're not invited on a trip, but you are thinking of doing one.
So obviously, like, you would want to organize your own house parties first, your own social events in your city, right? If you can't get anyone to come to your birthday party or come to an event that you're throwing, odds are you're not going to be able to get anyone on a trip, right? Or if you were, you'd have to sell them on like the cool thing versus, they should be coming because the thing is cool, but also because they think you're cool too, right? If they're like, you're a loser, but the trip is good, it's a bad vibe.
So like Alex proposed to me, like he wanted to do a trip in Romania here, like a winter ski trip. There's a lot of good nature here and you want to get footage and all that kind of stuff. And I'm debating whether I should take one of the girls I'm dating, because I only started seeing her, right? This one girl. And I'm like, well, if he's coming and there's like 6 other girls, and that's kind of overwhelming for someone who had just started seeing.
I would not do that.
You wouldn't do that.
I mean, you're bringing sand to the beach, right? Unless, I mentioned this towards the beginning, unless like you're bringing her as a way to like remove yourself from the dating pool to give other guys a chance, because you're so high status, right? Like, then you could make an argument for that, but that's obviously not the case. And yeah, it's going to set the wrong tone.
That's also strange for her too, because I'm assuming she might get kind of uncomfortable, right? Just start seeing a guy and suddenly there's 12 people, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So it has to be like kind of all strangers or a couple that's been seeing each other for a long time, like something like that.
Well, you could bring a couple if the couple's cool and fun and like a party couple. I brought my buddy Jay and his girl, and they were like the best because they were like a cool couple and very outgoing and like helping to, facilitate everyone else having fun. Like for some of you guys who have been to immersions, like it's always me and Maria, pushing, the games and the fun. And of course, Maria as a girl, will kind of make it safe for the other girls to like let loose and be cool and fun party. So I'm not saying don't ever bring couples, but if you're a single guy and you bring a girl, like likely there's going to be drama if you hook up with other girls. And you'll end up in like a more serious relationship if you don't with the girl that you brought.
Okay. Right. Okay. All right. That's my question. So I'm going to nix that. He also said that it's probably not the right trip for her as well. So
I would do something more along the lines of what you guys already did. Like, him and a girl and you and a girl, and you do a little like girlfriend experience, GFE.
Big. He's like, oh, we'll bring a cameraman and we'll bring 3 other and we'll bring 6, So he wants to do it big. So,
well, remember the number of guys depends on the number of girls, right? Get that 3-to-1 ratio. It's crucial, right? You can do a trip with 2-to-1. Like I did Lake Como with 6 girls and 3 guys, which was great because we all fit in a 9-passenger van, right? And the 2 guys were very close friends, and I became friends with both of them on a previous trip, right? So I knew the guys were super cool and comfortable. All 6 of the girls were friends of mine from Kiev. One was from Georgia. And it was a highly, highly curated, like awesome group of fun people. I knew everyone would have a great time. like some wild, crazy sexual stuff broke out on a couple of the nights. But that was like after I'd done tons of trips and really like knew like this, how to mix the right sort of personalities. I was like a puppet master with this sort of stuff because I had that pool to draw from. And that's sort of the really high level stuff you can do down the road. But in the beginning, right, like just aim for the ratio, have a good spot. You don't need to do something incredibly extravagant or expensive. Like just, try to build on, baby steps forward.
As far as like content goes though, like, since it's like winter and we're doing like a winter trip, if you have any ideas of how to like get good content for doing like a winter trip other than being on the slopes and skiing and snowboarding, obviously it's less than going to like a beachy.
Arguably, it's just as good. I mean, Yannick just did that. Yannick, you want to share about what you guys did?
Yeah, well, I don't know how much variety you get out of like in terms of the content on like during the winter compared to.
Well, the cool thing about the winter, you can ski, right? Like, and so there's content there. You can take photos in the snow. You can have bathing suits in the snow. You could have hot tub shoots in the snow.
Snowmobiles is what we actually want to do as well. All right. Yeah.
Snowmobile.
Now, Tuan, there's a lot of, there's a vision here. I'll tell you more of what we're doing.
Okay. We'll talk about it. Okay. Thanks.
We did a very cool trip to Bukovel in Ukraine one year. We had, I think, 9 girls, 3.5 guys. One guy like came and another guy left, and we rented a cool cabin and we went skiing a couple days, and it was great. What was your biggest aha? I'm curious from Yannick and Alex from this call.
I think that the ratio is pretty important. It's almost just like when there's fewer girls, they literally get more entitled. I think there's less competition anxiety.
100%, 100 billion%, right? If you put them in an environment where they need to compete and they need to be on their best behavior to win, they will. And if you incentivize them to not have to do that, then you're going to get a worse version of them. It's just human nature.
Think of it like this. Women they operate on a spectrum. They can be really nice and they can be terrible. and it's a dial. It's up to them. They'll be nice or really horrible. And like, I can't control that other than controlling the environment.
Exactly. Give them the permission and the the possibility to be tyrannical and horrible. They will.
I also learned that from basically like you don't really get any credit. Like if you bring them on the trip and all that, like okay, oh, you got us here. Well, now what? Like what? Okay, we already have it. We're already here. Like we don't get any quote like real credit, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, like you just assume the worst, expect nothing, and then you'll end up in a good spot.
Basically, what I'm trying to say is like there's not it's almost like there isn't much goodwill. You're kind of having to prove yourself again and again.
100%. And I feel like that's true, and even in a relationship, right? Like guys will be like, well, I did this and I did that and I did this and now I can relax. Like, nope, you can't. The second you take your foot off the gas, you start to have problems. That's life.
What I got from this call is like, wow, there's a lot of design and decisions you can do that really it all helps in that direction of really encouraging good behavior.
That's why my trips were so successful. Just I solved for everything that could go wrong. I chose the right people, chose the right venue, had the right ratio, had the chefs, had the itinerary, had everything. And like, these were like the most fun I've ever had. Like that in 2018, like I was on a trip almost every other week, and I lived the life of like a billionaire for pennies, right? Like it was unbelievable. I built so much confidence. I crossed everything off my like sexual bucket list, all my fantasies. I remember like being on that yacht in the Maldives and just like pinching myself. I'm like, I can't believe I'm actually on a yacht like this. I've never been on a yacht like this. And there's 20 freaking models getting onto this boat. Wake up. Where are you? And then I got to employ everything I learned from many, many years of social dynamics and like, not being overly aggressive or thirsty and like just winning on such a massive level. I like the confidence I got from that. Where like, wow, I am just as cool as anyone else I've like always looked up to. It was like the most sort of validating experience a guy could have for when it comes to this stuff.
I also have to say that I think in the end it actually helped me be more of a capable guy in the eyes of the girls that were with me.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because that is the sort of stuff that builds attraction. And that's why you don't have to run game and do anything special when the ratio is in your favor, right? If you're just the guy taking care of business, like keeping people safe, having a plan, taking people from here to there, managing the environment, girls they're like, wow, this guy's very capable, right? He's competent. Like, women look for competent leaders above all else. And these trips provide an amazing sort of fishbowl for them to see a very competent guy who can lead, and a guy who can lead beautiful girls and doesn't lose his shit, like when the situation, gets a little dicey or weird, right? So they're seeing all of this, and they will fall in love with that guy over a short period of time. That's why like the last night of the trip, you'd be shocked with the girl who maybe like wouldn't look at you the first day, had zero interest. By the end of the trip, she's like completely in love, and you haven't done anything. Maybe you didn't even interact with her. Like, this is how I landed one of the girls.
Costa Rica, the hottest girl the last night. It's 2 a.m. She wants to play chess. Like, what the fuck? And she set up the board and like, amazing.
And you don't have to be Mr. running game guy. Like, the opposite is what works. Like, not giving them attention, doing your own thing. Like, you could be on your laptop working, like making content all day. Like, one of the guys that we'd bring on the trip a lot of the time as a photographer was a very well-known blogger, a Russian guy. He knew tons of girls, so he would also bring girls for us. But he literally, like, everyone thought that he hated them. Like, I even thought he hated me, because he was very antisocial. All he did was he would just sit in the living room on his laptop editing content, and had like a mean look on his face the whole time, right? And everyone would be like, whoa, why is Sasha so like, he doesn't like me, he doesn't give me any validation. It just drives the girls crazy. They just want him even more. It even messed with my head, right? Like, at one point I went over like, dude, like, we cool? You like don't like me? He's like, no, I'm just busy. And, we got over it. But you can literally do the opposite of what you would have to do in any other situation and win. It's very counterintuitive.
I also had an experience like that where one of the girls, I didn't really talk much with her. Her English wasn't that great. And then she's kind of just being all over me and kind of going through my hair and nipple twisting me and all that shit.
I had such a weird experience on one of the Maldives trips. There was one girl who, like, she almost never like did anything social. She would go to bed really early. At one point I was like, well, who invited this girl? Like, how did she even get here? And then on the last night, instead of going to bed, she comes over to me and she's like, Robbie, make me a drink. And I'm like, ooh, okay. And then we ended up having a wild and crazy night. And like, just because it was the last night of the trip, and that's what happens. Like, everyone, has a different sort of vibe when that happens.
Yeah. So based on what you just said, can it ever be the case that you're on the trip and you're too laid back, where the girls are like, I'm not interested in this guy, he's just quiet, he's like a wallflower? Does that ever happen? Because you're talking about, like, basically, you're on the trip, it's better to not try, not push so hard. I don't know, just curious if it's been.
This is where the ratio helps you, right? Like, if that's a 1-to-1 ratio and you're just the guy in the corner as a wallflower not doing it, no one's going to pay any attention, right? But if you got a 3-to-1 ratio, there's going to be a bunch of girls with like, you're going to be the last option, but still a really good option, right? So the ratio either wins that or it loses that. It's 100%, and that's why it's so important.
Okay.
And obviously, you don't want to be completely like to be on your laptop editing the whole time and completely disengaging and being like an aloof jerk, right? Like, you have to have a lot of status to pull that off. Or you have to have a really, really good ratio. If you have a 5-to-1 ratio, then that's, even more likely to work. But it's a lever that is going to depend on the other aspects in play.
Yeah, okay. No, okay, makes sense. I know Dan Bilzerian like talked about that like 10 years ago, where he's talking, having his parties with his buddies and, having like stacking it with the ratio like 3-to-1 and, but that's just for parties. It makes a difference. This is like a trip, so I'm assuming like.
Well, Dan's ratios were like 15-to-1, like ridiculous stuff, which I actually think, that works for you as a celebrity. right? But when you get a ratio that's really lopsided, like 5 or 6 to 1, the girls get bored and they realize they have absolutely no chance, and then they feel like they can't win, and then they go to sleep, or they're just like unhappy. So that's why 3 to 1 is so optimal. Out of all the guys I know, the only ones who managed to consistently win the game are those who built and invested in a high status social circle. You can certainly approach women and try your luck on the apps if you're a Chad, but those strategies simply don't work consistently to attract top tier women and awesome friends into your life. But for most guys, the idea of building a social circle can feel overwhelming, so they continue to hunt for women in their usual ways and end up settling for a girl they were never really that excited about in the first place. To avoid this fate, join our community and instantly plug into a highly vetted social circle of cool dudes to network and navigate your journey with. You already know it's hard to find wingmen because the good ones don't stay in the game very long. Many of our members travel together, end up living together, build amazing circles, and even businesses together, both in the West and in many of the best locations around the globe with gorgeous women and low cost of living. I'm extremely careful who I let into this community, but if you feel like you'd make a good fit, you can apply to join. The link's in the description.